I'm Kevin, OSNOS4 and BX257, here to bring you another 1980s G.I. Joe tour review. And today I'm going to be taking a look at the Cobra Hostile Environment Trooper, the 1988 Toxo-Viper. Now, the Toxo-Viper makes his first comic book appearance in the old Marvel comic run G.I. Joe spin-off, G.I. Joe Special Missions number 17. That makes his first appearance in the regular title in issue 86. Like a lot of 1987 and 1988 characters, he doesn't make any cartoon appearances, but he does make an appearance in the 1990 NES G.I. Joe video game. The design of this figure is a bit polarizing. People either really like it or really hate it. And you're about to see which side I'm on.
Okay, so by now you could probably see why this particular figure gets a lot of hate. He has that weird steampunk alien look, and the clashing colors really don't help. But we'll discuss that a little bit later. Let's first take a look at his accessories. The first one being what the contents list on the card calls a pistol. No, the audio didn't just cut out there. That's all they've called this thing, a pistol. It's actually hooked onto the top here by this air hose. I'm not quite sure why they weren't really that descriptive on the contents list, but there it is. It was hooked on by this little peg on the top here, which is fairly easy to crack off and even miss. But it also has a peg on the front here. And while that's kind of awkward, this one is actually a little bit more sturdy. So I guess that's an alternate way of attaching it. Or maybe attaching the air hose to the front means spewing the stuff out, and maybe attaching it to the front means sucking toxic chemicals in. I don't really know. What I do know, however, is that you don't normally have a barrel with a little sight on it unless it's a projectile weapon. So perhaps this top portion is indeed a pistol, and it's the bottom portion underslung like a grenade launcher, which is the chemical spraying unit. Next, it's just your standard 6-inch G.I. Joe wire hooked onto this very strange looking backpack. But you'll notice that it does have these hoses which actually go over the shoulder, so I'm not sure if these two are spray portions or they're just I don't know, intakes or something. But not only do you have these free-floating bulbs on these wires, each side cracks off, but of course you also have the peg which the hole is actually connected into. That's also fairly easy to crack off, and both the bulbs and the pegs are fairly common to break off and hard to see sometimes in photographs. When putting the backpack back onto the figure, you have to make sure that you're actually pushing in through the center mass of the backpack rather than holding it by its sides, as I would normally do, and I'm pretty sure most people would normally hold it by its sides and push it onto the back that way. But that's probably the primary way that these back bulbs actually get cracked off. And finally, we have what the contents list on the card calls an environmental helmet. I'm not quite sure why they gave this an explanatory name, but not the pistol, but whatever. It's a really odd design, and it's also kind of a hard plastic. So when you're putting this thing on the figure's head, as you can see, it sort of chips away at the guy's nose. So he winds up having the purple plastic showing through his face, which really looks awful. One thing I do have to say is I don't really like the color scheme of the helmet. This sort of brown that they went and put over the main faceplate is totally absent in the card art. As a matter of fact, I believe Fun School of India, their version of the Toxo-Viper helmet is painted differently, and that portion is actually green, which I think goes quite a bit better with the figure. In my opinion, it's the bulky, very strangely designed helmet which really gives the Toxo-Viper his personality, because otherwise he's kind of a plain figure sculpt-wise, except for two very odd things on the figure. The first is his boots. Honestly, from the side, it kind of looks like he has boot sneakers with those little stripes down there. And the other thing is when his face is revealed from the helmet, he has this very odd, almost like horse bit-like thing around his mouth. There's also very tiny little studs along this sort of peaked ridge on the front of the hood that he's wearing here. All in all, it looks very strange. The sculpt of his face is also kind of strange as well because he has that very long, beaky nose. One very interesting thing to point out is, while the name Toxo-Viper means that he's part of a Viper Corps, or a special detachment of Vipers, the assignment to being a Toxo-Viper is also part of a punishment. And in fact, probably no one actually wants to be a Toxo-Viper. So actually calling him the Leaky Suit Brigade, part of his nickname, is probably a better way of describing this guy because underneath the environmental suit is probably just a regular Cobra soldier, the Assault Viper, a Techno Viper, or something like that underneath there, only temporarily until they prove themselves again to re-enter their base core or whatever their actual core was. So who is the Toxo-Viper's opposite number on the G.I. Joe side? Well, it can be only one, the 1985 Airtight. Now, I think that this is actually the reason why the colors for the Toxo-Viper were even chosen. Despite the fact that this guy is a 1988 release and this guy's 1985, so if this guy wouldn't have been on the shelves for, well, over a year before this guy was released, but I still think that they had Airtight in mind when they designed the colors. Because when you think about it, his base jumpsuit is purple, and on the color wheel, the opposite to that is yellow. The same thing with green. The opposite to that on the color wheel is red. So these guys are literal opposites. And there's an even further comparison between Airtight and the Toxo-Viper on the file cards. On Airtight's file card, you'll notice that it actually talks about his protective suit being built by the lowest bidder of the government, basically meaning that his suit is actually built on the cheap and is not particularly safe, which is exactly what's on the Toxo-Vipers as well. And while for Airtight they've sort of spun that line into a joke, on the Toxo-Viper side, they spun that into a work philosophy for the guy. Okay, it should be obvious by now that I'm not the biggest fan of the Toxo-Viper, because I don't think that I'll be using him as just a standalone figure. I won't be using him as intended, as a hostile environment trooper. Even though I'm certain that other people will, and I can totally see how some people would actually kind of like this figure. Both as a hostile environment trooper, he also has the sort of a built-in story that he's trying to redeem himself to get back into whatever specialty Viper Corps that he was originally assigned to. And of course, his design is just so weird, kind of a steampunk alien type of thing going on here. He's so ugly that he's probably appealing on that level. But I don't think I'll be using him as a standalone figure, because I don't really have a display for hostile environment guys. Mostly because he would have to fight against Airtight, who I don't use as a hostile environment figure either. I put him on the deck of the US's flag most often because of his bright uniform. He looks more like a deck handler. But I do have a use for this guy as the main driver of the 1988 Imp. He's often shown in pictures driving the Imp for some strange reason, even though they're not connected by specialty in any shape, way, or form. But he looks good there with his contrasting colors. And if you're wondering about his accessories, well, maybe I'll just give them to this incomplete bat, which in my mind makes a whole lot more sense, giving it to a figure which doesn't need the environment suit at all to use the equipment. Now, if my terrible review hasn't dissuaded you from buying this figure, you don't have to worry. He is a fairly common figure to find on the aftermarket with all of his accessories and for dirt cheap. The only thing that you have to worry about is, of course, the condition. The plug on the back of his gun is fairly easy to find cracked off. Here I have it in the alternate arrangement, but the plug on the back middle of his backpack is also something which is cracked off and also fairly hard to see in photographs. The bulbs are often cracked off as well. And then you have to worry about the paint job on his nose because that's fairly easy to rub off. But otherwise, he is a fairly common figure to find, and good luck to you if you actually want this guy.
Hello everyone, I'm Kevin, always on this forum, BX257, here to bring you another 1980s G.I. Joe toy review. And
You have to make sure that you're actually touching and forcing the actual... But I'm sure that you'll say that these guys are a perfect match to each other. Well, that's all the time I have right now. Please check out my Facebook page for more information and behind-the-scenes photos for these reviews. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for next time to see another 1980s G.I. Joe toy review. See you then.